Released in 2011, a not insignificant amount of people consider Arthur Christmas to be a holiday classic, right alongside works that have existed for a lot longer like Frosty or Rudolph. I find the movie pretty interesting given that Arthur Christmas was produced by a partnership between Sony and Aardman. You would probably recognize Aardman's typical work with Shaun the Sheep or Wallace and Gromit. The last time Aardman worked with CGI was in collaboration with DreamWorks, and that was only because they didn't want to risk their puppets getting wet. You may have also noticed that the movie looks quite different art-wise from their typical stuff. This in concert with poor marketing, a busy December release window, and for some reason using a Justin Bieber cover of Santa Claus is Coming to Town as a promotional tool, combined with the movie getting more attention only after it hit DVDs. The story starts on November 25th in Cornwall, in the sleepy little hamlet of Trelew. There, a little girl Gwen is sending a letter including a drawing of Santa to the North Pole asking for a pink bike. The letter arrives at the North Pole on December the 2nd, where it's been received by the mail department staffed by Arthur Claus, played by James McAvoy. If you're a nerdy guy, you would probably know him as young Professor Xavier. If you're a nerdy woman, you know him from either his calves or as Mr. Tumnus.
Let me guess, it was my non-threatening masculinity. I'm sort of Jack, but still in a little bit of a British way, you know?
Arthur penning his reply. But that was just a prelude. The movie starts officially on the night of December 24th when Santa is doing his rounds. And there are a couple things you really should know to understand the plot. First, in this universe, Santa is a position that's been inherited, passed down from father to son, starting at the original St. Nicholas and reaching into the modern era with the 20th Santa, Arthur's father Malcolm, played by Jim Broadbent. You would probably know him as Professor Slughorn. The second is that beginning in 1941, when Malcolm's tenure as Santa first began, the North Pole started to modernize to keep up with the demand. And, have they modernized? Including their current sleigh, the S1. Yeah, Santa has a spaceship now. They've got it down to such a science that while the elves do most of the heavy lifting with delivery, Malcolm will only need to deliver one gift per country. Though, more to the point, the reason they can do these things is that Arthur's older brother Steve, played by Hugh Laurie, Dr. House, is the brains behind this whole operation. While Malcolm and the elves are delivering gifts, Steve is at the North Pole running the home base, keeping track of all the minutiae. This is partly the reason I've been and will be keeping you so abreast of when things are happening. Even when an unforeseen incident involving a speak and spell type toy occurs, they're able to handle it with tactical precision. And then there's dear sweet Arthur.
Really sorry, Steve. It's my Christmas slippers on the ice.
So you can understand the sentiment that Steve is anticipating taking over as Santa when Malcolm retires, which should be this year given it will be his 70th year as Santa, and 70 years is how long Malcolm's father, Grand Santa, played by Bill Nighy, Davy Jones, had in his career as Santa. But to get back to the point, later that night, once all the gifts have been delivered, the sleigh docks back at the North Pole at 4:19 a.m., Malcolm announcing at the post-delivery speech, to Steve's disappointment, that he's going to continue to be Santa. Thing is, though, earlier during the chaos of the incident I just mentioned, a bike fell off the conveyor belt, and since Steve wanted to make up for lost time, none of the elves noticed it. So, after most of the elves have gone to bed at the North Pole, one elf, Bryony, notices it.
A child's been missed!
Do you want to wake up the whole North Pole?
Good idea! A child's been missed!
So, as you can no doubt guess, based on the fact that you've probably seen a movie at some point in your life, the bike is for Gwen. The commotion actually gets Malcolm's attention, but Steve assures him this is only a margin of error, and the child will get their bike within the window of about 5 days or so. For obvious reasons, hearing that does not sit right with Arthur. So, Grand Santa offers to help Arthur deliver the gift using his old sleigh, Evie, and the 8 descendants of the original 9 reindeer. Arthur, being a Santa fanboy, is entranced by Grand Santa's plan, and doesn't even question Grand Santa's plan to use his old map to fly to Cornwall. There is just one itsy-bitsy little faux pas in Grand Santa's plan, Toronto.
What is it? No idea, I've never seen it before.
During their mad flight through Hogtown, Bryony reveals that she's stowed away, and after escaping the 6, they notice they're down to only 7 tiny reindeer. Meanwhile, Steve is informed that Arthur's gone, and as they later figure out, he took the old sleigh with him. So, trying to get in contact with the sleigh, they have to bring out the old communication module staffed by Ernie Flicker, quite possibly the oldest elf on planet Earth.
I wouldn't worry. It's not like they're facing man-eating lions.
Yeah, here's the fun thing about that. After flying out of Canada, the sleigh trio went in the exact opposite direction, stopping in Idaho, because Grand Santa insisted that they needed to borrow a metal reindeer to put them back at 8. During this, Arthur gets mistaken for an alien, and in a hail of shotgun fire, they resume flying, landing at around 6 a.m. in what Grand Santa insists is France, only for Bryony to point out that based on the smart tech the elves have equipped, they're in the middle of Tanzania. To be exact, the Serengeti National Park. As you can guess, lions find them. Arthur almost lulls them to sleep with his slippers, but the old-school communication module on the sleigh wakes them up. In the process of fleeing by way of the sleigh, they lose 2 more reindeer, Arthur having to pour magic dust all over the park to let them fly away, levitating a bunch of the other animals. While continuing to fly, Grand Santa starts complaining about his camera being busted, revealing that his motivations in this case were not altruistic. His plan is to prove that his way still works by using his old stuff.
Let me guess. A picture of you in the sleigh delivering a gift to show me how it's really done?
This is despite the fact that, as he explains, the last time he tried this was in the 60s, and that time he almost started World War III because he, without realizing, did this in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Regardless, using Briney's tech, at around 6:30 they arrive in Trelew, only for Arthur to realize that since he selected the first Trelew on the GPS list, they're not in Trelew, Cornwall. They went southwest to Trelew, Mexico. And wait, it gets worse. As both Arthur and Steve independently learn, Arthur's actions have the Earth on high alert, thinking that there's an alien on the loose. In the process of trying to flee Mexico, they lose another reindeer. A short while later, while trying to contact the North Pole, Grand Santa interferes, causing the sleigh to tip over while trying to turn around, causing him to fall out on the island off the coast of Cuba at 6:40 a.m. During Arthur moping about his current predicament, Grand Santa admits that he wanted to prove his old way could do it so people would remember who he used to be.
I was a bit like you, lad. Keen as cranberry. You get old, that's all. Everything changes.
Afterwards, Arthur has an epiphany that the picture that Gwen included in her letter isn't of Malcolm, or his grandfather, or Steve. It's a picture of Santa. And because Arthur doesn't explain any further, and starts trying to rowboat to England, Grand Santa and Briney think he's gone insane. Though his master plan of rowboat to Cornwall is interrupted when they realize the reindeer are still in the sky. So they rig up a hook to grab onto the sleigh. While that was going on, Ernie's machine actually bricked the North Pole system, so they can't use any of their advanced tech due to someone not saving their data since 1981. Also, the news they missed a child starts circulating among the elves, causing them to wake Malcolm up to find out if it's true. Pretty obviously eager to help, the elves try to convince Steve to go along with it. And, because Steve is a giant child with an inferiority complex, sods off, leaving his father and the elves to their own devices.
Good night, Santa. Gloria, Hosanna in excelsis.
Leaving Malcolm to reflect on what he's been dealing with this whole movie. See, it was explained earlier that the reason Malcolm wants to stay on as Santa is that he's violently terrified that he has no idea who he is if he's not Santa, even though at this point he's a figurehead, a jolly old fat guy in red who lets the elves do all the actual hard work. That does not change the fact that he's scared of a life bereft of being Santa, because if he's not Santa, then who is he?
You'd be my Malcolm, dear.
So, after a quick impromptu visit to Arthur's office, Malcolm takes the missus with him to try and fly the new sleigh to Trelew, getting Steve's attention, forcing him to come along to drive the damn thing, due to Malcolm having a snowball's chance in hell of actually being able to drive his own sleigh. Also, they kind of forgot to tell the elves what they were doing. Don't worry, they figure it out. Using the S1's superior flight capability, by 7:33, they beat Arthur to Trelew, and Steve makes the drop himself in his Versace Santa suit. Except, no they didn't.
No le entiendo, señor. Soy Pedro.
Malcolm made the exact same mistake Arthur made of selecting the first Trelew that appeared in the GPS. Again, Mexico. While rerouting to England, the elves get in contact with the S1 to catch the clauses up to speed on what's been going on with Arthur. After leaving the Caribbean, the sleigh trio took a minor detour into space to figure out where England was, losing their reindeer upon re-entry into Earth's atmosphere, Grand Santa's pet reindeer filling in. During this, the governments of the world are still hot on the sleigh's trail, still believing they're dealing with an alien invasion, sicking a predator drone on them as they enter Cornwall. Not helping is the sleigh's UFO disguise. Arthur bails out before the sleigh is destroyed by a missile, with Briney joining him in due time. Grand Santa is fine though, he landed in a bin. Still a couple clicks out, Arthur uses the bike as, well, a bike, and pedals it to Gwen's house while Briney rewraps it. Apparently, the same way animators will try to use references to make sure things look and move accurately, they also figured out how you would need to wrap a child's bike to make sure it looks natural and in such a way as so Arthur could ride it and made wrapping. The main bullet points of what I just said are what the elves just told Malcolm and Steve, the S1 arriving in just the nick of time to make sure it still looks like it's night. So, Grand Santa, Malcolm and Steve, all completely independent of each other, enter Gwen's house, which interrupts Arthur's delivery of Gwen's bike to make it all about themselves.
I'm Santa. I'm delivering it.
Don't be silly, I'm Santa. Can't you see from this suit?
I am actually Santa, and I think it would be best.
Alright, let's just stop the momentum for a second and talk about the Clawsmen here. On a very fundamental level, each of them embodies one part of how we, as a hypothetical worldwide culture, view Santa. Because they embody only one aspect of it, though, they're completely out of whack. Grand Santa embodies the traditional view of Santa, or the spirit. Armed with a little red sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, at the time, his methods worked. They're also reliable and don't run the risk of being disabled by a blackout. Think akin to a difference between a book and a blog post. The problem is he hasn't bothered to adapt to a changing world. Even just trying to account for skyscrapers, he's still using a map with Atlantis on it. And hell, Grand Santa still thought Canada was a barren, godless tundra with no one living there. And that's only true for 70% of Canada now. Malcolm represents the body. Not only does he look exactly like how people imagine Santa to be, which makes sense given he's been Santa since 1941, around the time commercial depictions of Santa started, he also represents Santa as the ultimate hard worker, the one man who will stop at nothing to deliver every child's present. But it's also clear that Malcolm is over the hill in terms of his career as Santa, and he's been doing it so long that he doesn't even know why he's doing it anymore, outside of being unsure who he is without it, shunting most of the actual responsibility onto Steve. Also not helping is the pool table incident.
This is about that pool table, isn't it? I told you you should have written to me.
I was 8! You're my dad!
Malcolm has been Santa for so long, he saw Steve wanting something from him as just another gift delivery. Trouble is, Malcolm forgot who Steve was asking. Steve wasn't asking Santa for a pool table, he was asking his dad. And while we're on Steve, he represents the brain. The belief that Santa is a wise old elf who's constantly adapting to make sure as many kids as possible get gifts. And nothing he's come up with is truly bad. The simple truth is, when you're dealing with the sheer logistics of delivering to billions of kids, you need someone like Steve to handle those kinds of numbers. The trouble is that Steve is a dynamo when it comes to operations, but as Tulum, Mexico showed us,
Will you get? No, please don't cry.
he just isn't very good with kids on an individual level. So much so that when they learn about the situation with Gwen, he doesn't use her name. He calls her by her number in their system, and tries to play them off missing her as a glitch. Finally, there's dear sweet clumsy Arthur, who represents the heart. Before all this went down, his job was to personally write back to every child who sent Santa a letter, so he cares about and empathizes with every single child on a deeply personal level. That's why even though all the other gifts got delivered, the fact they missed one to Arthur means his entire night was a failure.
She won't understand. She'll think she's the one kid in the whole world that Santa doesn't care about. She'll feel so left out.
But as these events have shown, Arthur is not exactly a smart man, and he wouldn't have gotten so far as he did if he didn't have help. That's why when he said,
This is Santa!
what he was trying to say is that it doesn't matter who ultimately delivers it. What matters is that the gift got delivered. So his father, grandfather, and brother making this about themselves means they don't get it. Furthermore, the entire point is that the kids don't see Santa. They just need to know he was there. The only way this can work is if all these parts support each other. So after Malcolm deigns Arthur to finish the job, they duck into a closet to watch the moment of truth.
Santa brought me the bike I wanted!
While watching this, Malcolm has his own revelation. For all his hard work, Steve deserves to be next, but perhaps Gwen is right about Santa being the one who gave her the bike.
Drop complete! And we have a new Santa!
For a split second, Gwen catches Arthur leaving, but not enough for her to get a good look at him, just enough that she still believes. 1 year later, Steve has been made the official COO of the operation, making him Arthur's man in the chair at the North Pole. Malcolm, having finally retired, spends half of his time with Grand Santa and the rest salsa dancing with the missus. Bryony is the new vice president of the Pacific Wrapping Division and is making money moves to inevitably wrap the moon. All the reindeer found their way home and now lead the new team of 5,000 reindeer who pull the new S1 on Christmas night. And then of course, there's Arthur.